Welcome to the Outthinkers Podcast. Plug into fascinating minds and breakthrough ideas that are transforming industries and the world. I'm your host, Kyan Krippendorf, founder of Outthinker Networks, a global think tank comprised of corporate strategists, innovators, and entrepreneurs that are shaping the future of business. If this describes you, join us at outthinker.com. Now, let's dive into this week's episode.
If you are truly committed to a growth opportunity or solving a customer problem, you will be interested in learning more about it. And that learning might also involve investing in a new technology fragment or a new technology building block or a new technology platform. If you're interested in leveraging, you're going to say, hey, we're going to leverage the infrastructure that we have, the platforms we have, the capabilities we have. Now, this really puts a damper on the way technical people think. If you really are committed to solving a problem, everything should be fair game. So if you get these revolving doors and every leader is coming in saying, I just want to leverage, what does that mean? You're not letting the organization learn. And if you have this going on for a while, you will end up with an organization that only is interested in exploiting, and you will actually start losing talent because technical people want to be charting new territory, learning new things, and everybody loves a learning organization.
That was Jayshree Seth, a corporate scientist at 3M who currently holds over 80 patents for a variety of innovations, with several additional pending. Jayshree was appointed 3M's first ever chief science advocate in 2018, and as you heard in the highlighted clip, is using her scientific knowledge, technical expertise, and professional experience to advance science and communicate the benefits of science and the importance of diversity in STEM fields to drive innovation. She is highly educated. She's got a master's and PhD in chemical engineering from Clarkson University in New York, a bachelor's of technology in chemical engineering from the prestigious NIIT Trichy in India. In this discussion, we dive deep into the topic of some of her books, especially her latest one, The Heart of Science, and a fascinating Fast Company article that she co-wrote with our good friend who's been on this podcast, Rita McGrath, titled A Guide for Managing Innovation: 4 Big Mistakes Technologists Wish Their Business Leaders Would Stop Making. She has a lifetime of experience building bridges between science and business, something 3M is uniquely good at. We also talk about how the scientific and technical community embraces ambiguity and failure and what business leaders can learn from them. Tips on how to foster effective collaboration and communication with your technical employees on the front line that is in line with both strategic goals and realistic expectations. How to foster and optimize the opportunity for, as she calls them, uncommon connections or fortuitous collisions of ideas. How to get those to happen. A sneak peek into the culture of empowerment at 3M that makes them such a powerhouse in innovation. Ladies and gentlemen, Jayshree Seth. Jayshree, thank you so much for being on the podcast with us. It is great to finally have you on.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, I've been fascinated about your career, and our listeners, by the way, find great content on what your role is, how you came to it, how you came to the United States, how you found your path to this really fascinating role that very few other companies have. So what I would love to do is go deeper into your work because people can find that other places. I do start with 2 questions that I always begin my podcast with. And the first one is, just so we can get to know you a little bit more personally, could you complete this sentence for me? If you really know me, you know that.
If you really know me, you know that I write poetry, I compose songs, and I love acrostics. So basically acronym-based frameworks. And I say, hey, I'm a STEM professional. That itself is an acronym, but I can give you my spiel there as well.
Oh, yeah?
The real shtick is STEM, science, humanities, technology, engineering, and math. That's what I believe.
I love it. And why do you put humanities into STEM?
I think it's strategically so important. If we really want the public and the society to accept science and science-based innovations, I think humanities and sociology is so critical to bring those innovations alive sort of contextually. So I love to create in the lab and in language.
Yes, no, I love it. I've got a list of several of your acronyms that I'm excited to go through, including one just as a preview that you talked about, which was errors. So I would love to eventually get into that one too. This is a podcast on strategy. You work strategy across many dimensions. You've got your communication strategy, your influence strategy. You've got science and the scientific method, which I guess you could say is a strategic methodology. What's your definition of strategy?
That's easy. Given my training, my role, strategy to me is simply the scientific method. The scientific method is nothing but a systematic approach to solving a problem or understanding a situation. So you observe something, it raises a question, you try to understand the background the best you can, and then you formulate a hypothesis, and then you plan and conduct experiments, you analyze the results, and the results lead you to a conclusion about the validity of your hypothesis. So now you can develop recommendations, you communicate it, you refine the next steps, and then you get to do it all over again. And that to me is the essence of good strategy and really a strategic mindset as well. You know, this is what we're seeing, this is what we know, this is what we'll find out, this is how we'll do it, and we'll adjust course as new data or new information becomes available.
Do you think then that management theory or the field of management is scientific?
I believe it is. I actually get sick and tired of hearing about set outcomes and focus on outcomes. The focus, in my view, should be on figuring out what needs to be done to achieve said outcomes. And if it doesn't happen, why not? What other experiments can be done? But people get so stuck on the outcomes and not the method, and they want to call it strategy. Mm-hmm. Strategy is really the scientific approach to get to the outcomes.
Yeah, and I love that you said that, because when I read your recent article that you wrote with Rita McGrath, who we here are big fans of, as are you, in Fast Company, that was one of the big kind of thoughts that I were left with. So would you mind, for our readers, and I encourage people to go find the article and read it, could you kind of lay out the structure of this article?
Yeah, I mean, strategy is great, right? But if you don't have the right culture and the right leadership, you won't be able to get it right. You won't be able to execute it in full measure anyway. So I wrote this article with Professor Rita McGrath. I'm a big fan as well. And in this piece, we specifically talk about the chasm that can exist between two very important communities, the business leadership and the technical people. And if it is not addressed, you know what they say, culture will devour your strategy, to paraphrase Drucker. And a lot of it comes down to the leaders understanding the microcultures, if you will, and the mindsets. So in this case, we're focusing on scientists and engineers and the importance of formulating the strategy and communicating the tactics in a way that actually facilitates the innovation that you need. So the technical community is typically quite comfortable with the unknown. You know, science itself is a process of discovery, and R&D is certainly very iterative in nature. So you gather information, you do an experiment, you leverage your learning, you do the next experiment, and so on. And if your hypothesis didn't work out, it's not a failure because you learned something. Failure is an integral part of the scientific method and of the innovation process, and it does lead to valuable insights. And technical people usually stay in their fields a little longer, so they carry with them some sort of a history of that area. And this is highly relevant to innovation. So business leaders, on the other hand, they are under immense pressure to make an impact and move on. And failing at something, whoa, gosh, golly, that is something business leaders don't try to do. They don't want to create difficulties for the technical organization, but they end up doing. And sometimes, to make matter worse, this revolving door leadership that has become very common at many large companies, it really causes a lot of stress. So we wrote about this in this Fast Company article that you mentioned. It's titled A Guide for Managing Innovation: 4 Big Mistakes Technologists Wish Their Business Leaders Would Stop Making. And we highlight like 4 areas where you need a better balance to close this gap between technical and business community.
So I'm going to ask you to list those and then we'll go into each one. But I do want to just underscore something that I don't know if the listeners will have noticed, is that this idea of short-term and long-term, that's understood. The difference between outcomes and learning, that's understood. But what I really was walked away with from your article is this revolving door, that the career path of business people versus technical people, that provides an enormous kind of, break in incentive, right? Because I need to do this for 3 years. I need to have a great outcome and then move on to the next thing. I hadn't thought of that.
Yes, and that is exactly why the one and only Rita McGrath did this article with me, because I think this voice of the technical community, of the engineering community, has really not gotten to this platform where we can openly share what is it that happens as a result of some of the business mindsets. And it is important for the business leaders to understand the technical mindset.
Yes. So could you list for us these 4 mistakes?
So the first one we call is misdefining ambition. This is when the leader declares things like, we need to play big. I'm interested in the next, X million dollar opportunity. So that's one. The second one is limiting collaboration. Saying things like, y'all focus on the technology. Don't worry about the business side. We'll take care of it. The third mistake is underestimating technical challenges, saying things like, what we need is lower cost products and we need higher performance. And, the fourth one is dismissing technical process. We're doing too many things. What we need is brutal prioritization. So these are kind of like the 4 things that we pulled out, big buckets of mistakes that can happen.
And when we just read the tagline, the top line, I think that we don't realize these are really big buckets. Each of these is kind of a foundational source of disconnect. So I'd love to ask you to just go into each one a little bit. If we start with misdefining ambition, when we say, I need something transformative. We are going to build something, we're going to build a rocket ship that's going to go to the moon. Now that I'm here, we're going to do it. Well, why is that a problem?
Well, you just said it. You walk in saying things like that, you will get a lot of internal eye rolls because, there's nothing wrong with aiming high or trying to have lofty goals. But that statement, it makes people feel like, y'all were playing small before I arrived, And the technical people know that big projects take time. And they also suspect that you will likely not stick around. So you might be just doing your check the box. And big opportunities are not just sitting around waiting for folks to easily find them. And if technical people knew they were there, they'd already be working on them. So many in the technical community will be pretty skeptical if you start like that. I believe what they should say instead is something like, hey, I value the technical perspective and I want to understand what you think we should do to generate significant new growth. This will show that you're willing to put in the effort to understand the business, the customers, the trends, the industry, the ecosystem, the technologies, and the roadmaps from all perspectives. It shows commitment, not just this, we're going to do this big thing. Because you have to understand in uncertain situations, everything is a hypothesis. So you really can't promise that outcome before the experiment is done. Only thing you can control is that you do it well. And so technical people see this happen very often, all this disproportionate hoopla about one big project. So they'd rather underpromise and overdeliver. And so good leaders know that and they act accordingly.
Interesting. So what kind of results or outcomes or metrics should we be, as business leaders, be emphasizing?
Well, it comes down to the scientific method, right? What is the hypothesis? How did you form that hypothesis? And honestly, it could be that it's the next $100 million opportunity. But starting with the outcome in mind is the problem, because that immediately, provokes a reaction where people say, I don't understand how they said that. What is the data that leads them to make this conclusion that there is this opportunity out there? So it's almost like in the communication, in the tactic, and how you developed that strategy and being transparent about it.
Got it. We have time. I'd love to understand how 3M does that. And it reminds me a little bit of some of the things that are known that Amazon does. And there are probably some organizations that have been able to use language or tools or approaches to kind of bridge that. let's first get on to the next one, talking about limiting collaboration.
Right. So telling people that we'll take care of the business and y'all do the technology, this is not that reassuring. If it comes across as a surprise, let me tell you, it is not reassuring because technical people are inherently curious and they consider themselves perfectly capable of thinking through logically. That's what they do. And being involved in providing input on strategic decisions that affect the business because they affect the technology. So just because you don't think that, you can or want to be involved in technical doesn't mean that the reverse is true. Technical people actually also love business people who are interested in technology behind the innovation. So it's much better to say things like, hey, I want to learn more about the technical aspects. I also want you all to help me as we develop our business plans, because there is nothing more that frustrates technical champions is silos and siloed thinking. And the thing that people don't realize on the business side is that the nature of technical work makes technical people way more inclined to cooperate and collaborate with one another. But there's a very palpable sense of competition among business folks. So business leaders should accept and better yet address this, because most senior technical people want to contribute and be part of determining whatever it is that we're deciding are the critical actions or milestones on the business side.
This raises a question that I can't articulate properly, but I heard you talk about the difference between R and D, and you being someone who jumped into technical problems that you had no experience with, how to make loop fasteners, and you figured it out. And so what I kind of hear you saying is that technical people could look at the problem of how do we market this product, or who do we sell it to, or how do we source as another problem that they can apply the scientific method to, and they can solve, even if they don't have the authority or the role or existing knowledge to solve it.
Yes, that and the fact that all those decisions and discussions plant seeds in the head. And sometimes you can suddenly make uncommon connections. So good technical people like to plant all these seeds somewhere, and you never know when that moment comes and you can make that connection. So it's very important to have all that information.
Yes. So your third one, underestimating technical challenges. Can you talk to us about that?
Right. So lower cost products, higher performance. Really? Don't we all know that? I mean, is that really a new strategy? If cost could be just magically lowered and performance improved, wouldn't that effort be underway already? So to fundamentally change that cost performance equation of any product, it either requires a new scientific discovery or advancement on a new technology building block, or more or different infrastructure to scale, or a different supply chain to secure. So from a technical perspective, if the business is serious about the strategy of low cost and improved performance, they also need to be serious about investing time and money to develop the new. However, many times the implicit expectation on part of business people is, we'll just leverage what we know, but we will deliver the new. Short-timers in business leadership roles, they are often interested only in leveraging and not learning. What they really should be saying is, hey, how can we add more value for our customers? Help me understand that. That shows to the technical people that the business leaders understand the importance of, staying up to date with the latest and learning about technologies and trends and breakthroughs. Many business leaders just don't realize that the short-term exploitative strategies really have an impact on the long-term health of an organization. That short-term, short-sighted strategy of only leveraging what has been done in the past really cannot be sustained. And so business leaders should acknowledge that and act accordingly.
Yeah, when I read the article, I think it really opened my, because I've used the term explore and exploit. I love learning and leveraging. I think maybe that's even more clear. And until I read this article, I did not really understand the distinction. I don't know if you could try to explain that to me. What's the difference between learning and leveraging?
So if you are truly committed to a growth opportunity or solving a customer problem, you will be interested in learning more about it And that learning might also involve investing in a new technology fragment or a new technology building block or a new technology platform. If you're interested in leveraging, you're going to say you want to solve all these problems, but hey, we're going to leverage the infrastructure that we have, the platforms we have, the capabilities we have. Now, this really puts a damper on the way technical people think. If you really are committed to solving a problem, everything should be fair game. We will leverage as much as we can because we all understand the value of being able to leverage what we already have. But at some point, you need to learn in order to be able to leverage it. So if you get these revolving doors and every leader is coming in saying, I just want to leverage, they don't say that. But essentially they say that because if they want this big opportunity and they want results, what does that mean? You're not letting the organization learn. And if you have this going on for a while, you will end up with an organization that only is interested in exploiting, and you will actually start losing talent because technical people want to be charting new territory, learning new things, and everybody loves a learning organization.
And I would add to that your pipeline of new things then dries up. So you have nothing else to leverage because you haven't put the time in or let people put the time in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years before to work on something that eventually. It's fascinating. It reminds me of what my work, I get curious about subjects and I start studying them. And it might take me 5 years or 7 years to work on it and complete the book. But my team is interested in near-term opportunity. And they're saying, you shouldn't work on that. You should work on this. But it is 7 years later that I take my 15%, as you guys get at 3M, that seeded what eventually becomes something we can leverage.
Exactly. So good leaders understand that, look, we have to learn and we have to leverage and we have to have a good balance of learning and leveraging. And there are ways to do that. You know, you can have a few people looking at the longer term. You can have few people looking at the shorter term, and you can have people that make sure that the long term and the short term are connecting. So again, it comes back to the importance of the culture where there's a lot of exchange of information. General learning is still going on, although you may be leveraging for certain things.
I just want to push you a little bit further in that, because here's kind of how I'm thinking. There is maybe the leverage things to produce outcome, create revenue. Then there's working on problems and trying solutions that may or may not work. We have to do that types of things. Is there a stage maybe before, I think like an artist who paints just to paint, a scientist who's just curious about, Leonardo da Vinci had his notebook and he just had questions about how does the eyeball of a bird work? And he was just curious. Is that like a third level?
So here's how we do this. We anchor our Da Vinci's in either our markets or our platforms or our customers or trends or solutions. So some way or the other, a learning organization is always thinking about how things work, why they work the way they work, and what we can do to make those things work better. So I'm particularly interested in trends and technologies and emerging stuff, but it is always grounded in what can this possibly mean? What does it translate to? And what will the customers need as a result of these trends coming to fruition? Or what other trends will come as a result of this? So you can always anchor that thinking in a learning organization because you're thinking of not just the current today, but also what's to come tomorrow. And that's what the leaders have to commit to, that we are here to solve problems for this particular customer or market. So we're invested in understanding what are the trends at play.
And there's something I think 3M does as well, that is, if the attempt to solve the problem results in a technology that failed for that problem, there's somehow a marketplace. Like the most talked about story of innovation ever, of course, is a 3M Post-it note, which was a technology meant to be a super sticky adhesive and completely failed. But somehow there was a openness or a marketplace, or somehow someone could take that and say, hey, we can use it for a different application.
Yep. That kind of connection happens at 3M all the time. We call them uncommon connections. We have 51 technology platforms, and we are constantly getting together as a technical community. That's our secret sauce. And we are listening to problems people have. solutions people have that are looking for problems, or, and that interaction is really the empowerment of the technical community.
I think that's really, really important to have that marketplace of problems and solutions that can find each other. Anyway, we could go deeper in that, but I do also want to ask you about this issue of dismissing technical process.
Yes, so this is a tough one. When leaders come in and they talk about prioritization, we know that we will lose time and we'll have a lot of inefficiencies if business priorities change. And ideally, they should not change dramatically just because a new leader emerged or because it's a new business quarter. So as a new business leader, you have a lot coming at you, and it's really hard to get the contextual grounding to make decisions on what is important and what is not. So it is really important to understand the current priorities of the organization that you walked in and a reasoning behind them so that you can make changes, because this whole process of building capability is very path dependent. It's very cumulative. And if you do this on again, off again of resources and priorities, it really impairs that ability and it can even kill it. So technical people need to feel reassured that you, as the person making all these prioritization calls, you have sound logic and you have reasoning. And really, it's the worst outcome from a morale perspective if you change priorities and then you let your subordinates do the, quote unquote, dirty work of letting the technical people at the bench know that the priorities have changed. Because what happens then is, even if there is good reasoning, it's lost in translation and it's couched under metrics and metrics that are meaningless because they are stripped of the context. And you can't walk into the technical people and say, that's what the boss wants, because that is not a marching order for the technical community. They are trained to question, and they will continue to do so. And they know that most projects don't fail because they don't have priority. They fail because they didn't have focus. So it really important when leaders come in and say, I want to prioritize, instead you should say, I'm striving for transparency and clarity. And if we shift focus, I will include your input in the decision process, because business folks often walk in and they confuse seemingly the act of prioritization with the demonstration of leadership. And to us, to the technical community, leadership follow through, what happens after prioritization is really the leadership, or the communication of the loss of deprioritization of a project. Just doing prioritization for prioritization's sake is a problem.
I know we're reaching the top of our time with you, but I think I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you to just touch on one thing, which isn't necessarily in the article. 3M is admired as a company that for, 100 years, I don't know how long 3M's been around. Well over 100. I don't know if there's another company that has had that level of longevity through innovation, and you do it from an organizational people perspective. What if you could just tell us a few of the things that you think are unique to 3M that we and other companies might be able to consider adopting or adapting in order to enable this type of activation of innovation?
Yeah, many things. I think the most important is the culture of empowerment. And what I mean by that is we have 15% culture, and we did it before anybody, before Google. And what it essentially is we can spend 15% of our time working on a project that we feel is important for the company, and it may not be in our area. And so that is very empowering. As you're walking around, you find some problem that you think should be solved and you think it could be relevant for 3M, you can be working on it. So the sense of empowerment. And not everybody uses it, but the very fact that you have it is phenomenal, because that's what gives that sense of empowerment, that culture, right? Now, how are you going to learn about what other problems are out there or what other solutions are? Another magical thing that 3M does is brings technical people together, and it's called Tech Forum. It is run by technical people for technical people, and bringing them together, the magic just happens. People say, well, I've got this problem. Oh, have you considered this? Oh, I didn't know about that. Oh, talk to this person. And then suddenly you've got this idea, you're helping other people in your 15% time. And now what? Well, 3M also has grant programs. So I can take a 15% project. I met all these people at Tech Forum who thought, yeah, that's a great idea. I can write a proposal, and a committee of peers gives me money to work on this problem. So that's another magical
Peers.
thing.
So it's not the central authority going through the pipeline. It's great.
Yeah. So peers get together and we go, should we give the money to this or should we give the money to this? So we have grants like that. And I think in my career, 30 years, I have gotten 18 or 19 of those grants. And it's phenomenal because not only does it teach me how to think, how to come up with ideas, how to make network and inspire others to work with me on this, how to generate funds and really fight for your idea, and then self-budget, all these skills that you want your innovative employees to have. The culture is providing you all of that. And then the best part is you can then have these ideas go into an NPI hopper of a business or a division, and they can take that on and you can commercialize it. And you can stay on the technical ladder if you so desire. You don't have to move to management to really get to that level. I mean, you can actually have levels that are exactly, lockstep on the management side. And so, as an example, I'm at the level of corporate scientist, which is the highest level you can attain in the company as a technical employee. I'm at the same level as a division vice president, and we both get a parking spot. In Minnesota, that's important. So I think not only in name, it is actually, we all sit on the technical sort of council that our CTO has. So they do that in real ways. So that's the dual ladder is another very important aspect of 3M's culture. So these are some of the few things. And then, of course, we have a very, sense of science applied to life that also really brings our purpose. Our brand promise is science applied to life. Our, purpose is to unlock the power of people, ideas, and science and reimagine what is possible.
Wow. I love it. Yeah, my son is applying to physics programs now as an undergrad in college. And that's the kind of place I think that he's looking for. And I can see why that allows you to attract just great talent.
Yes. And, don't get me wrong. It's not like we don't have our issues over the years. Every company does.
Sure.
But having a strong legacy, of a culture of empowerment, a culture of collaboration, and this communal context of improving lives, that is the essence that we try to keep alive.
So I've got like 15 more questions and we're going to reach the time with you. Luckily, you have a lot of material that people can find. You've written 2 books, you write articles. I found lots of podcasts with you. Is there something that you didn't get to say in this podcast or something I should have asked that you didn't get to answer?
I think I would appreciate talking about your question about the books, because I am pretty excited about the 3rd book and it comes early 2024. So the plan is for it to be the final in a trilogy. I wrote the first one in 2020. I wanted to do something meaningful after the George Floyd killing right in our backyard in Minneapolis. So I published a collection of my essays and all proceeds go to a scholarship for underrepresented minority women in STEM. And it's administered by the Society of Women Engineers. And you won't believe it, I got to meet the first scholar.
Wow.
Who was supported from the sales proceeds. And I was just so inspired. And I decided to write the 2nd book, and that came out in 2022. And happy to report, Kaihan, that now we have 4 scholars whose engineering journey is being supported by the sales proceeds of my 2 books.
Amazing.
So in the 3rd book, I'm creating tips and tools and techniques and templates on many of my acrostics and frameworks on various topics that I have developed over the years, for leadership, innovation, strategy, diversity, culture, science advocacy. Because I get asked often, can I get that framework? Can you talk about this acronym? So I think it's very important. And I encourage your listeners to support the books and the cause. They're available on Amazon. Heart of Science, Engineering Footprints, Fingerprints, and Imprints is the first book. Engineering Fine Print is the second. And the 3rd one will be Engineering Blueprint. And my strategy is simple. I'm using what I call my own pockets of privilege to pay it forward.
That's amazing. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing it, for doing the work for us, and for taking some time to share some of it here with us. It was such a pleasure to have you on, Jayshree. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank
Thank you to our guests. Thank you to our executive producer, Karina Reyes, our editor, Zach Ness, and the rest of the team. If you like what you heard, please follow, download, and subscribe. I'm your host, Kyan Krippendorf. Thank you for listening. We'll catch you soon with another episode of Outthinkers.